It is 8:34, so we're going to get going. We are streaming this on YouTube. It's muted right now. We will unmute in 1 minute. We're ready. Thank you. Chad, take it away.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. We have a lot of material to cover, so I'm going to apologize in advance. There's like roughly 80 slides, so I'll move through quickly. Slow me down if it's too fast or if you want to talk more about anything. But just in the interest of time, so everyone's not here for 4 hours. We probably should start with approval of the prior minutes,
sure.
Right? Everyone should have the May 31st and June 15th meeting minutes. So we'll take a motion to approve those.
Motion to approve. Second.
Okay.
You should say all in favor.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed.
All opposed. All right, unanimous. Thank you. So we'll jump right into it. And like I said, I'm just gonna breeze through some of these. Some of these are just old materials that we carry forward meeting to meeting, so it's always in the update. So September 15th is still the major milestone with the ride. We have another meeting with them on August 3rd. That's a check-in meeting. As far as progress update, a lot has happened since the last building committee meeting. That's the middle section here in blue. We've done the 5 concert series outreach events. Talk a bit more about those in a second. Upcoming key dates and also school committee meeting is tonight. We're meeting with the Bristol Historic Commission next week for the concept review. And then on our radar is the Warren concert series. Again, we'll talk about that in a bit. Some consultant visits continue, and then that ride stage should check in on August 3rd. Let Lisa talk to the design activities since the last event.
Okay, great. So we've been in the process of doing all of our existing conditions. So a couple more people that need to talk to the site for some of the smaller consultants, like the elevators and stuff. But we do have a series of draft reports coming in from all of our consultants. They're all, we should have most of them by tomorrow. We'll start looking at that information and trying to digest it. That'll also be, that's the same with the traffic study. Demographics is still in progress as well. A lot of research that has to go on for that process. Code analysis we did receive for a draft report. Moving down to visioning, we had 3 visioning sessions. Manuel is going to give us an update a little later on in the presentation. We've had some meetings with our wetlands consultant, done a lot of research. We're actually going to walk the site with them a little bit later today at the high school, and we'll be setting up a meeting with Rhode Island DEM. Thank you. Probably in the next couple of weeks, so we can kind of sit down and talk to them and go through all the permitting processes and make them aware of the project. Historic Commission, we are actually in the process of pulling that presentation together, and we'll be sharing that with them on July 6th. And we still have an ongoing meetings with the users, mostly the principals, just to kind of go over programming and make sure that we have it all right. So upcoming meetings, we will, based on our presentation today, to see which direction we have, we'll probably get geotech services out on site, so we can do a couple of either test pits or some borings to make sure that when we go to construct do any construction on site, make sure that the soils are properly investigated. And we did have an integrated design meeting, that 2 weeks ago now? It was a great kickoff meeting. I hope you guys, everybody who was able to join, you guys learned kind of a lot about the process, and we'll look to maybe about the 3rd week of July of having another integrated design meeting to really focus in on the project and the systems and building envelope and stuff like that. So, so everything as far as schedule is all falling into place. I think we have everything pretty much online, and David, anything? Very good.
Yeah, but some items ahead again, focus groups.
Yeah, that was more of use with the principals and stuff, so.
Perfect, so, one of the big discussion points we have today is to finish up our site assessments. The last time we met, we looked at those 27 different sites. And again, just a reminder, this is all sites that are owned by Bristol or Warren in excess of 7 acres. The reason we looked for Bristol and Warren owned sites is one, RIDE does not pay for acquisition of another property. Two, the schedule likely is not going to permit acquisition of another property because we need to demonstrate ownership before that submission goes in on September 15th. So after we met on June 15th, 25 of those 27 sites were eliminated. There were 2 sites that warranted a deeper dive. One of them was Asylum Road in Warren, which is right next to the existing Hugh Cole School. There's a vacant field over there. And then, of course, the other is the high school site. And the high school site we're all very familiar with. We know that the Silver Creek runs through it, so there's some constraints there, but otherwise, definitely an option at 43 acres. The Asylum Road site, so the last time we met, we had pulled GIS data on this site. Right after the meeting on June 15th, the PMA team went out to actually just put eyes on the site, because GIS doesn't always capture everything. What we did find when we walked out there, so this is the GIS map with a wetland overlay turned on, so you can see the different types of wetlands shaded in here. So it looks like it's pretty clear. This is that large field that we were really targeting. And then you have the ball fields right on the other side of the bike path. So we were hoping that some combination of those areas might be a viable option. What we found when we went out there is right next to the bike path, there's actually a creek that runs right parallel to the bike path that is not mapped in on GIS. That creek unfortunately has buffer zones associated with it, so it's not on GIS now, but as part of the project, we would have to have a wetland scientist come out and do some wetland flagging, and flag the limits of it, and then the limits of that determine where your buffer zone starts and stops. So what we did is we test fit a building, I'll show you that in a second. This is right from the DTM's website here, so looking at the setbacks, it's 100 to 200 feet, so we map both of those in on overlay, just to show everyone what that might look like and what that does to your site constraints. Here's a pure just Google Earth image of the site here, so the bike path you can see cuts right through in the middle here, and the creek actually runs right alongside of it. If you go historically, you can look at the satellite images from 70s, 80s, 90s, and you can see that creek a little bit better. There's actually a little bit of a pond right over here that's a very dark immature, but when it was less overgrown, it was much more visible, but it is still very much there. So when we overlay that onto the existing site, this middle teal line represents the approximate location of the creek. The shaded area would be the approximate location of the 100-foot buffer. And then the dotted area on the outside would be if a 200-foot buffer were found to be applicable by DEM. So what we did is we looked for, through our portfolio of schools, high schools that were similar size to Mount Hope, but also on a compact footprint. So when we set the scales and we plot that building right over onto that site just to test fit to see if it's even conceivable to have a building that size for the site. So this test fit here is actually at Hanover, Massachusetts high school, built a little over 10 years ago. It's a 3-story school, so it is a compact footprint. 800 students, so very close to your enrollment. And then it's 157,000 square feet, but they don't have CTE, so they're a little bit smaller. We're thinking that we're probably around 10,000 square feet bigger than that for Mount Hope. You can see even with the 3 stories, once you capture the necessary parking associated with that building, no matter which way we spin, twist, pull this building, that wetland and those buffer zones running right through the middle of that property are definitely going to be problematic in order to squeeze the school onto that site, which is unfortunate. It's a nice big flat field, but the setbacks certainly don't do us any justice. So unfortunately, after the site visit, PMA's analysis and recommendation is that this site does have, unfortunately, a fatal flaw for building a new high school on that site. So our recommendation at this point would be to drop this one from the list, which the only site remaining on the list, the high school site. That's a big decision though, so I'll open up to discussion, comments, questions. Anybody has any?
When do we think the demographic study would be out? It's underway, but is there, do we really know what the size of the school's gonna be?
So we are hoping to have rough numbers early July, first or second week of July. We won't have the full report. until a few weeks after that, but we should have a ballpark idea. We don't think it's gonna change that much from where it was at. So we do think that this is gonna be around the similar size. If anything, it might be a little bigger.
This doesn't have any athletic field shown in there either.
Yeah, good point. So this would be completely reliant. This high school does have tennis courts and a track and a football field, concession stands. We had to cut all that stuff out of the test pit because there was no way that was gonna fit in. If you put all that stuff on there, it would consume really the neighborhood Alex Drive right next to it as well. So this would be reliant on using fields from Cuba Coal and they can do it across the street, which you obviously have some scheduling challenges having 3 schools trying to share the same fields.
I got a quick question. So in Warren, there's a lot of plans for different housing projects. Some are comprehensive permit plans. I think there's 2 comprehensive permit plans, right? Yeah, there's 2 that could create more residents moving in. I see an 800 student fit. I mean, what's the plan if that number jumps back up over 1,000? Will we have the room, or are you coming back to who's ever sitting in these seats 10 years from now saying, yeah, we need another 50 mil because we're gonna add an addition to the high school?
So that should all be part of the demographer study. They'll reach out to the both towns and, building departments and stuff to try to understand what developments are.
So our building guys there, and I just talked to them the other day.
So we connected the planner with the ergonomics person.
So that would be part of their report as well.
And that report's gonna come out when?
So
That's the 1st or 2nd week of July.
as a draft, and then, but it takes, in order to collect all that data and have it all pulled together, it takes some time, so hopefully we'll have the final report a little later in July.
But we're moving forward today. If I looked at the agenda and I read it correctly, that you need a vote today on whether or not we're going with new or renovate.
Right, but we don't need an enrollment vote. We just need to know preferred option out of the 2. So if there is a chance if you were to renovate and the demographer comes back and says it needs to be 1,000 square foot high school, then it's your renovation cost plus an additional cost on the renovation.
Okay.
Absolutely, but schedule here is certainly aggressive, and we know that there's a lot of wheels in motion and at the same time. So we'll push out the information as soon as we can.
All right, fair enough. Thank you.
Any other questions, comments, concerns on the Asylum Road Forum site? All right. So I think for our purposes, we will consider that site eliminated and move on with the 199 Chestnut existing high school site. All right, with that, I'll turn it over to Manuel. We'll walk through the visioning efforts that have happened since last public meeting. And most of you over too.
Thank you. Good morning, members of the school building committee, members of the public, and those of you listening. My name is Manuel Cordero. I'm the educational facility planner. And over the course of the last month, at the end of the school year, we had the opportunity to convene a set of visioning meetings. The meetings were open to the public and had participation from administrators, teachers, and community members, parents, included in a conversation about goals for each of the grade level groupings, and then thinking about how to connect those educational goals, programmatic goals, into ideas about spaces. So what I'd like to do is share with you a little bit about each of the meetings. At the school committee meeting recently, I ran through where we were back then. Since then, we have completed the elementary school visioning, so I'll share some of those results with you. Sorry, what am I doing here? Do you want to just go forward?
Yep. Pressure over here, you just play.
Thank you. All right. These are in order of how we conducted the meetings. You'll see in a moment the meetings were similar, but we adapted each of the meetings a little bit to grade level grouping. Each of them started with this kind of goals, strategies, issues, mapping. Again, this was an opportunity to have folks tell us what was important in thinking about the future of their schools, both in terms of program, but also in terms of spaces, and we kind of organized it based on goals, strategies, and issues. For those of you who are curious, all of the outputs from this are being assembled. We transcribe everything that was written in the tiles, and all of that will be part of the full visioning report that will be included as part of the stage 2. Next slide. So here are some of the highlights of that exercise at the middle school level. Again, you'll see in a moment, we have a focused discussion later in that session about grade configuration, but that was certainly something that folks were thinking about. I think lovely to see folks thinking about strong academic and behavioral efforts. At the middle school, super interesting to note that folks were already thinking about career technology, so thinking about that connection of what's happening at the high school with what can happen at the middle school, and we know that that's already happening. There was a real interest in outdoor spaces and thinking about how to support being outside. And then I can't not point out make school exciting. I think that's something that felt important to highlight. So next slide. We also did at each of the meetings some kind of polling. So this was a live polling. And what you'll note in a moment is the difference between each of the schools. So similar questions, I'll show you in a moment, different grade levels, how they responded. At the middle school, in terms of educational spaces to prioritize, you'll see here the core classroom spaces was the kind of priority space, but also thinking about some of those breakout type spaces and collaborative spaces. And then in terms of master planning and what the priorities there are, creating 21st century learning environments. So that's super exciting and certainly something that we can center in this work. Next slide. And then at the middle school, we wanted to have an opportunity to talk about kind of the existing grade configuration and alternative grade configuration. This idea of the possibility of having the 5th grade at the middle school. So we had folks kind of talk a little bit about what are the challenges and opportunities for each of those, like the existing and the alternative. And I guess I'll point out a few highlights, especially thinking about the alternative grade configuration. Folks were interested in thinking about safety of each of the students, concern for thinking about the transition of 4th graders into 5th grade. So how that was demarcated, how that happened. I'll highlight this, and this comes up at the elementary level as well, communication with parents. And I will share that at these meetings, there are already things that parents came with an understanding of, and the understanding wasn't always exactly what was happening or what was ahead of what was happening. So I think that's a critical component of it. And then, I think I'll end by saying that everybody just agreed that creating spaces that felt appropriate for all of the grade level groupings was critical. At the high school, next slide, please. The next meeting we held was at the high school. The high school started with a similar exercise of goals, so we can go to the next slide. Obviously a little bit different in terms of what folks were thinking about. So you'll see here some of the things reflected in terms of goals, but thinking about safety was an important piece, thinking about some of those environments and what they have to be, 21st century learning environments. So collaborative spaces, there was a real interest in community spaces, maybe not surprisingly, your high school is a community amenity. And also identifying some of the issues, and the issues include a variety of things, including thinking about things like funding and engaging community in this decision. Again, here we've kind of done a quick little highlight of those goals from the educational perspective, programmatic perspective, and the project perspective. So you'll see here, I guess, some of what I've already highlighted. Maybe I'll also point out that here there's an interest in the expansion of the career tech education, so that component was important. And I know that the integrated design meeting happened, but there was a good set of conversations about sustainability as well. So here your note, again, similar questions that we asked at the middle school. You'll see the shift here over. When asked about educational spaces to prioritize, I mentioned this a moment ago. In this case, core classroom still got a good response, as well as those social emotional spaces and collaborative spaces, but we got a great response to state-of-the-art CTE spaces. So I think that reflects obviously that we're talking about the high school, and folks are really interested in that hands-on type learning. And then again, what would you prioritize in the master planning process? Participants, again, in this case, also responded creating 21st century learning environments. And then at the high school, we had an opportunity to kind of switch things up. And in this case, we did a kind of archetype exercise. And the idea here was to ask folks to imagine a student in 2047, so projecting ahead 24 years, and again, like 20 plus the 4 years that these students are in high school. What is this student's experience? And we just asked them to imagine their academic interests, what a day would be like, what types of spaces they like, what types of teaching and learning they like. So next slide, you'll see just some of the highlights. I'll kind of point out, it was just super fun and exciting to have people kind of dream about this future facility. So on the left, you'll see the student that has arrived on their solar-powered bus, and go check on their kelp forest project. They're a student that learns by doing, and their outdoor spaces are their kind of preferred learning spaces. And then on the right, the student's interested in athletics and gardening as extracurriculars. Their day at school includes an expanded lunch and a flexible learning schedule. They're also hands-on learning, but also verbal and learning in different styles, or wants to learn in different styles, and their favorite spaces are gym and garden. So anyway, we got a really good, broad idea of what folks were thinking about, and I think really importantly, the next category was to have them connect that to some of the goals, the district strategic plan goals, but also the goals that we had talked about earlier. And then the last meeting, which I haven't had a chance to share with you yet, is the elementary school visioning, which happened in mid-June at the end of the school year. Again, we started with that exercise of goals and strategies. So next slide. I think here each of the tables was actually very different, and partially because I think we had a group of parents that were together, a group of teachers that were together. So on the teacher side, and I think this slide might reflect some of the teachers, they were interested in thinking about some of the learning spaces as well as issues of safety. On the parent side, they were really interested in the question of grade configuration, and we spent a good amount of time on that. And I'll reflect on that when we get to the next exercise, the last exercise, but let's go to the next slide. So here are some of the highlights from the kind of goals, strategies, and issues. Again, on the educational goals, rigorous academics, and supporting high-achieving students, building goals, including safe, inclusive, adaptive environments, and project and program goals. Really making decisions based on students' best interest, I think, kind of captures that category really well, but also thinking about some of those community spaces. So next slide, again here, maybe not surprising at the elementary school, the focus of educational spaces is on the core classroom. That's where students spend most of their time, so not surprising. Here, interestingly, when folks were asked about like what to prioritize in the master planning, it was the creation of 21st century learning environments, but also facility conditions. So important to note those differences across the categories. And my last slide is the slide about grade configuration. This was a really good and rich conversation. I think it was really important that the Superintendent Riley framed this very much in terms of educational adequacy and programmatic reasons. I think there was a concern from parents about the decision being centered on a facility decision. And obviously all those things are connected. You'll see some of the questions asked is, how does the shift happen in grade configuration and when? There were a lot of questions about timeline because parents are trying to think about how does this impact my student? And then there were concerns about how do we deal with the age difference, having a fifth grader in the building with an eighth grader, and exploring the possibility of creating kind of different learning communities in order to support kind of both teaching and learning at grade level, but also keeping those separate wherever possible. And also in terms of school safety. So I know ran through a lot. There'd be a more comprehensive report on this, but also happy to answer questions if anybody has them.
So what I heard was a strong connection to the environment from a lot of came out of the study. Seeing the design, the school design, the city. The connect out your garden over and over again.
Yeah.
Solar panels.
Yeah.
I think it's great. But
yeah.
This is coming from the kids, correct?
Yeah. Well, this is coming from parents and teachers. Yeah, I think a real interest in supporting some of those outdoor spaces. And some of you might remember, members of the school building committee, that we also conducted a teacher survey previously, and it had similar themes in it as well.
That's nice.
I'm sorry, I have a question for educators and teaching and instructing outdoors. Does it work?
It can work with some planning and training, yes.
Yeah.
Some teachers do an excellent job at it already. We have some teachers in some of our science teachers who incorporate it into their lessons and do outdoors. One of our courses at the high school is run completely outdoors for the most part, except when the weather doesn't allow. So we definitely have folks who are better at the middle school's been trying to build an outdoor classroom to align with their science curriculum for a couple of years now. We've applied for 3 or 4 grants. We haven't been able to get them, so it hasn't gotten off the ground. But they had a really nice developed plan for that space, kind of like between the building and the shed, that grassy area. They had a really nice plan for an outdoor classroom there that we just haven't been able to get enough funding for. But those teachers have been working on professional development and being ready to teach outdoors. So certainly there are opportunities. I think our elementary teachers, just because of the way our facilities are laid out, other than Hugh Cole, who has a gardening club and works in their little, they have an interior garden. They do a lot of work in there. The others don't really have the green space to do it. Rockwell certainly doesn't. They have a small garden that they, do with the kids after school. Colt Andrews doesn't have any garden space either. So the places that have space and utilize it, teachers are really anxious to do that work and do the training to the outside.
I just like to do a follow-up question on that. So I always say, I'm very comfortable with people in the room right now, but I have to think about when the people in the room change and we're putting these resources and our funding into these outdoor spaces or alternative learning opportunities, how do we keep them in place when the people in the room do change and we don't get hit with, wow, you dumped all this money into this and look at it. It's overgrown, it's disgusting, it's deplorable, you're never gonna use it again. And these are the real issues that we are faced with every day in the community. And it's just reality.
Yeah, I would say it has to be tied to curriculum, because if it's tied to the standards are not changing. They were updated recently for the first time in like 25 years. I don't see that happening again for another at least 25 years. So as long as we're doing something that's aligned to the curriculum, not just a for fun idea, hey, wouldn't it be great to just do this?
Right, it has to be intentional.
If it's tied
So
to
if it's
the
tied to the
standards,
curriculum, it's tied to the standards. Now, is this through RIDE?
they're the state standards.
Yes, so the state standard,
Yeah.
they are implementing this stuff in so that the districts will have to follow up with it?
Oh, yeah, we follow the state
Yeah,
standard.
so there's no wiggle room around it?
No.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions, comments on educational program? We're moving into an update on the elementary and middle. All right.
So I'll begin, at the same time that the visioning, is going on in the background, we've got the educational programming happening. So we've taken a look at the existing program and, program plans, the enrollments that we understand right now, as well as policies on class size. What we've done is we've also taken a look where we project forward, where changes may be occurring in the objectives and goals for curriculum going forward. And so we've also been tabulating the space needs. So what you see up here is just a look at the existing program. This is Colt Andrews, both schools shown with all the floor levels. We've color coded the program so you can see that classroom tech spaces are in blue, and some of the activity or shared spaces that are also community use are in kind of that orange color, and special education is in purple. We see that in this school, we have 2 sections per grade that exist. There are actually 3 sections at the 5th grade. In this plan right now, there are approximately 4 rooms available. So they're being used, but they would otherwise be available for use. If we think about the 5-year projections for enrollment, we won't see a significant change in the utilization of rooms. We would have actually, we project 1 less classroom. We wouldn't necessarily need the 3rd, 5th grade, but we would be adding pre-K. So it's pretty much a wash of spaces. Those 4 rooms that could be made available would still be kind of potential availability.
Excuse me,
Yes.
sorry to interrupt, but, I really can't see it from here. Are those 4 available classrooms, where are they located? They're not in the basement, are they?
One of them actually is, so, actually, wait.
Yeah, that
Can you
is
see the
my,
red, can you
that's
see the
okay.
red lines? There's an unoccupied classroom in Andrews in the top, the 2nd floor, which is parking there. I don't know if those clicker works on there.
So we have a room here that's being used for meeting, used for special ed meeting space, but it's not a required space as far as the size of it. It could occur in other space or smaller space. We have 2 spaces down here, an additional sort of planning room that's being, a space that's being coming here for planning, as well as parents to teach.
Parents as teachers. So that planning room is for next year. It's actually a 4th grade this year, because this year we have 3 4th grades.
Yeah.
So that purple room that will be available this year is a 4th grade.
And then there's one additional classroom space that's.
Okay. Yeah, the reason why I bring it up, I think there's somewhat of a consensus that, all-day classroom in a basement is inappropriate, so I would just I would move to eliminate the basement classrooms if we can. I just don't think it's appropriate to have children in the basement for an extended amount of time.
Yeah, I think as we look into the planning and programming in the future, we may need to utilize the building efficiently and effectively, but we would try to prioritize certainly any teaching and learning space to have daylight and also not be in the basement, even if the basement has daylight. So that's something we'll look at. What we're seeing here are really just, preliminary, almost capacity checks on what the enrollment would look like. If we go to the next slide, this is taking a look at if the 5th grade were to move out of the elementary schools and be joined with the 6th grade, so the 5, 6, 7, 8. And overall in this plan, we have 1 less grade, but we would have 3 sections per grade. So it's basically a wash of the rooms. Those 4 rooms I talked about that would be available would need to be utilized to accommodate that program. So in this case, right now we are showing basement level spaces that are utilized for classrooms. This is just, again, a space check. We could certainly look at what other types of spaces might be able to go down there. But as far as the capacity look, it basically fits. Looking at Gutierrez and Rockwell, what we see here are the existing, there are 2 sections per grade. There aren't really any available spaces in the rooms, in the plans. If we were to look forward at the 5-year projections, it pretty much remain the same. There would not be an increased need for more classrooms in these 2 facilities, but there's also no available space. We do see a need for some additional special education space and support that we would need to be working in, not full-size classrooms. If we look at the next slide, if the 5th grade were to move, we're seeing that the Gutierrez School could be emptied. We see that the Rockwell would continue. We would add a pre-K to this school. And to do that, we would need the art and music room to share the same room, which is already happening at some of the facilities. The utilization of those rooms would allow it to be a kind of a combined room. So that's the way to create the capacity and get the universal pre-K.
Those 2 empty rooms across from 4th grade.
Not sure what
We
it is.
talked about special education expansion in those spaces.
Okay. So those are 2 empty classrooms that we just haven't designated.
Correct.
Okay.
Looking ahead at Hugh Cole, what we see here are 4 sections per grade that exist in the school. There are 3 rooms available. There are some rooms that are kind of doubled up. There are 2 classrooms that are being utilized for effectively 1 class with co-teaching. For the 5-year projections, we will see, well, right now we see that those 3 rooms are available. With the 5-year projection, 4 rooms would actually be available. There would be 1 less pre-K potentially in this facility that would be moved over into the Rockwell facility. And let's see,
Can you go one more slide? I think you're on the existing. There you go.
Okay, did I already jump ahead? That's so that's the the 5th moved out. So we're adding in this case, this is showing that we've added the pre-K. This one keeps, actually, because of the availability of space, we're keeping art and music. I'm sorry, I'm on the wrong one. Keep cool. For this one, the 4 rooms are available, 1 less pre-K that went to Rockwell.
So Bob, I'm gonna apologize. This
Yep.
is because I didn't explain the difference between the pre-K 4. So actually, those 2 available rooms would be 2 pre-Ks. Where you have pre-K 4, those are integrated pre-Ks. Those are district-wide programs. And currently, we're using 3, and maybe we would shrink down to 2 depending on enrollment, but we would actually need 4 pre-K rooms, 2 integrated pre-K, and then 2 pre-K 4s. So you wouldn't lose one, you actually need those 2 spaces. So I'm sorry, that's my fault when we went over this. So you need 4 pre-Ks, so you don't have an extra room. I just took it away. Sorry.
As far as TICMU at the middle school, right now in the school, we have 8 rooms that could be made available. If we look forward at the 5-year projections, that increases to 14 rooms available. But of course, if the 5th grade were to move into the middle school, we would be utilizing most of those spaces. We would still have a little bit of availability. And for this one, I think we want to dive into some of the zoning.
Sure, yeah, I can talk just a little bit about it. So the middle school does have capacity to move 5th grade into it. I think one of the things we've looked at just diagrammatically is how would we create a 5-6 academy or a 5-6 floor and a 7-8 floor, so that those different age groups would spend most of their day together. So in this diagram, the blue is the 5th and 6th grade. And there's enough space there to have all the classrooms we need, a little bit of their own library space and support space, and even its own entry And then the students would only travel to go to gym or to go to lunch or to go to the auditorium. And then if we were to create a dedicated 7-8 entry, those students could come in and there's a stair right there. So 7th and 8th graders would go upstairs and most of their day would be spent together in that floor. Again, traveling to go to specials or to go to gym or to lunchtime. So I think the scheduling, for the most part, they're not mixing all day long, maybe occasionally. And we're also accounting for putting a little bit, the paint is administrative space. So when they come in, there's a little bit of a home base there. There's somebody keeping their eyes on the circulation and so forth. So I think in terms of what would need to happen architecturally or building wise, it's actually pretty smooth to make this transition. I think we would recommend some exterior upgrades. The 5th and 6th grade entry, that entry is actually quite nice. The 7th and 8th, I think we'd do a little bit more to make that feel like a real entry piece. It's a little bit close to some of the loading areas and stuff, but I think we can make that happen.
So that was really just a preview of what's happening currently at the elementary and middle school. So the goal here is to optimize use of space. We know that there's empty space in the middle school that we're trying to take advantage of, and then at the same time, trying to take advantage of RIDE's newer and fewer program. So identify the building that is the most problematic, needs the most work. Let's see if we can shuffle the enrollment around in order to fit into the other buildings. Get the incentive, increase space utilization, and also operating costs and efficiency. So that's the goal here. A few steps ahead of that is the high school. With the high school, we are looking to move into that preferred solution. Goal here is to have the designers, architects, engineers get to work on the high school, and then the programming team can drop back and focus 100% of their attention on the elementary and middle school efforts. So tonight we're going to spend most of our discussion time on the high school. So we'll roll through a quick update here on the cost side of things. So looking at the preliminary test fits, the different scenarios. Last time we met, we just baselined everything at 177,000 square feet. Now that we have that next level of detail, we're looking at potentially, if we know the square footage of the gym, we can ballpark the square footage of the new addition onto the gym. And then on a new build, we have a better sense of where it might land to overall square footage. So that's been updated into the numbers. Everything else in this is exactly the same. It just spits out a different outcome. Again, here, this is just showing where your costs are going in each of the scenarios. So on the renovation, 63% is going towards what we consider your direct trade building costs. So that's really construction efficiency, if you want to put it that way. The addition renovation actually drops a little, 58%, plus that 5% for the renovation piece, so still around 63%. And then on the new building, 67% of your costs is going to basically direct trade construction costs. So better cost efficiency from a construction standpoint. The updated numbers here, so the repair and renovation didn't change because we kept the square footage at 177,000. The ad reno came down a little bit because we tightened up the square footage. It's really it's the square footage of the new plus the gym, and the gym in the ad reno is a little bit bigger than if you were to build a new gym with the RIDE guidelines. New construction also came down a little bit. Again, these are just conceptual apples to apples costs. We don't have detailed schematics, so I mean, this is not going to buy a gold-plated roof and a granite facade and Tiffany's glass and stained glass in the building. Yep.
On the new construction, it's 24 months. Is that because we can run the Mount Hope High School in parallel with the new construction? There's no interruptions.
Yep.
So it's a lot.
Exactly, yeah.
Faster.
And the ad reno is a little bit longer because the gym would have to come offline off season. So if we could take the gym totally out of service before the new gym is built, then we could potentially compress the ad reno a little bit, but that gets a little bit tricky programmatic.
I suppose you guys are you guys finding in some of these other construction projects and the ad rental projects that those 36-month projects, I imagine, there's added costs after a while, or finding, like, we had our new marina, right, where we had some added costs when we, built our new marina, you guys finding a lot of that kind of stuff happening.
We do, so the estimators that put the numbers in this use data from dozens of other renovation projects, are really looking at what that additional schedule time might cost the construction manager to actually staff it, trades to actually staff it. So that is baked into these numbers. Yep. Yeah, and that's part of that, construction cost efficiency piece where, you're throwing kind of good money at bad, so to speak. You're paying for construction time physically there on site instead of putting more of your money into your project.
But I think also what I'm hearing is the cost of renovation. Sometimes you uncover things that you might not have fully understood, and then there are costs associated with it. But those contingencies are built into the numbers.
So even the ones you were talking about, the ones, okay.
Yeah, on the far right bar here, this hash bar is the project contingency, so you can see on the new, it's a bit smaller because there's less risk in it. So we dial back the contingency, and then on the renovations, there's a higher contingency carry. The other thing important to note there is the swing space costs. So on the ad rental, we really need to look at that, maybe that cost can go away, that helps the numbers and brings it closer to the new construction. I still don't know that it makes it your preferred solution, but it certainly brings it closer in line. On the renovation, we'll talk about what a phasing plan might look like, so you can get an idea of what and why that swing space cost is necessary. Perkins has that in one of their slides coming up. And then this is just another recap slide, same from last time. So this is, each one of those flips is a K-12 school project. In the area, this is actually Massachusetts data, they just have a bigger data set to work on, but same contractors, same construction managers. So costs are really gonna be pretty darn close. So right now, the concept range that we're looking at is probably below where the MSBA trend line is. So we just need to be very careful with that we're not over the top on design, because we are at a very aggressive number right now, trying to save as much as we possibly can for improvements to elementary and middle school. We're gonna get into some of those different scenarios. Are there any questions on cost before we jump into? And we can always go back to this if we need to.
That abatement and demo cost included demoing the original high school?
It did, yep. Yeah, so that's carried in all three scenarios.
And when do we discuss, or maybe you guys work on the maintenance costs of the existing schools? So like, I know they need updates as well. But would that be separate in the timeline? It would be high school first, then we, as you said, we pull back and then we focus on those elementary schools and what they need.
Yeah, so as soon as we can lock in what road we're gonna take on high school, then we can focus the team's attention to the elementary, middle schools. And we got, I don't know, 60, 70, 80 people behind the scenes, behind this group of project managers and architects you see. They're ready to go to town, they just need to get direction from this group and they're ready to go. All right, I will let Perkins talk through each of the options that really were costed out in the prior slide, and we're gonna jump around if anyone has any questions.
Okay, so this was our sort of first high concept level of what it would take to renovate the high school in place. And obviously, it's all about the phasing, because we need, school never stops, so we're not able to move the kids off site. So how would we do that? It winds up being 4 phases, of which there's 2 or 3 phases within each of those. I think it's really, it becomes an issue of time, and also then, in terms of at a minimum, I would think these are 6 months, if not more, to do each phase. So you can kind of see where that winds up, even with doing sort of summer blitz kind of work. And summer's not that long, actually. So I think that's really the concern here, as well as students having, their experience of being, and I think we've spoken about that a little bit. Some people have that experience of living through a construction. You can imagine some students, their entire high school experience would be moving around in a construction. So I think there's cost savings, but I think it's really the time issue and interruption to your education that would be the issue with renovation.
The other thing that Ryan has made crystal clear is that this does need to be a 50-year building in their mind in order to be embedded in the program. So whatever solution we put forth, we need to be able to say with confidence that that's a 50+ year building. Generally, when you get into a repair renovation, it's a little bit harder of a case to make, as you can imagine, but just something to keep in mind.
Right, and there was a bit of the school that's in the flood zone, so I'm not sure what, adding that into the complications of whether what we need to do to address that. So we'll look at.
Excuse me, I'm sorry.
No.
What does renovation mean? Like, how extensive, what can you really do with those buildings? You're gonna pull the roofs off, you're gonna take walls on, what does that mean? Is it cosmetic?
Yeah, it's
Changing
smooth
windows,
walls,
it's-
envelope, yeah.
Systems.
It, basically, the only thing that stays is the foundations and the steel. And
But it
even,
can still be a cinder block building, it's gonna look pretty much like it does now from the outside.
So the new.
pieces of it could, yep.
Like why they built the building with those, with the trusses exposed on the end, it's like crazy. And so that would stay, right?
Could get cut
Pieces
out.
of it would be there, but yeah.
Just a quick question. On the prior slide, you showed that the term for the renovation would be 36 to 48 months. Does that include estimations of the current logistics problems for materials and whatnot in this country right now? Or is that just based on normal construction rates? So in efforts, the time period could be much, much longer than that.
Yeah, I think that's a best case scenario, I guess.
That's best case scenario, at 48 months. Wow. Okay. Talk about construction exhaustion.
So I'll go through, we looked at, I think what you'll see is what I would describe as almost site strategies as we look at, what we would do if we start to look at a new build on the site. So we'll go through these, I'll try to do this relatively quickly. So some of the issues on the site. So what we've discovered working with our wetlands consultants is this represents all the water issues, which we talked about already. So the creek is in purple, the orange is the actual wetlands area, the green line here is the 100-foot setback from the wetlands area, so really not supposed to disturb that area. And then the sort of the light blue cyan color is another 20 feet away where you're not supposed to build it, right? So you can see we start, and then the floodplains, there's some wetlands over here as well. So it starts to, creep into the site and limit what our buildable area is. One thing we started to talk to the consultants about is, what about where we already have disturbed area? Can we build, or can we put parking and driveways and things like that? And I think the preliminary answer is yes. I'm not sure we can construct there. In other words, I don't think we want to make anything worse than it already is, but there is some ability, since it's already a disturbed area. And we're actually walking the site this afternoon to get firsthand look at that. So that's one thing. Just as a sort of a reference point, we're not yet there in terms of what our code required parking count is, but currently we have about 264 spots on site. I think that will go down with enrollment, it will go down in terms of what will be required to put on site. So you'll see, I think we're working with more of a kind of 200 spots on site. Of course, we need a car drop off and a bus drop off. Next slide. And a little bit about the fields. So these are the existing fields on the site and the tennis courts. So in the upper left-hand corner is a multi-use field. That was funded with a grant. So that grant requires that that field remains. So that's not a field we can relocate. We need to keep that one. There's a practice football field, which is not quite as big as a regulation football field, but that was recently renovated. There's a throwing area for the track and field events, a new softball field with dugouts and backstop, and then the multi-use field in the middle. So those were all recently renovated. What wasn't was the track and field, the sort of the main competition. That's actually I think you run meet time, but you can't host a state event because the track isn't quite at regulation size. So we'll take that into account. You'll see, we looked at not necessarily including that improvement in this project, but allowing for that to happen if that was what you chose to do. And then there's 6 tennis courts. It's kind of a minimum. I think we can get away with 5, but you really can't hold matches if you don't have 5 or 6 tennis courts. Okay, so those are things that are need to keep. So we've talked a little bit about the gymnasium. This is a comparison based on the kind of working numbers right now in terms of enrollment. We don't have the final numbers, but that's our existing gym, and this is what would be funded by RIDE. So it's not, this is where what you get funding on, about 18,600 square feet versus 25,000 square feet. It's a little funky, I would say, the way it's used right now. Sorry, I'm over here. In that the main gym, the court is only striped for running this way, so you have hoops for PE class for practice, but you're only playing games in 2 different gyms. So that actually is equal to what would be funded. Typically, we would stripe it both ways, so you can run sideways and long ways and pull bleachers out. That's the way to kind of maximize the gym. There's a fitness area. The fitness area would be included, be a little bit smaller based on enrollment. So you can kind of get the sense of the value of keeping the current gym versus new.
The only difference is, and I don't mean to interrupt, but when you lose that other, 5,000 square feet.
Right.
So the softball and baseball teams in inclement weather and in the spring, when they first start up in March, they go indoors and they can go full ball. So I hear you, but you would have to find somewhere else for them to go and utilize.
Right, yeah.
Remove that space.
We looked at both options. We're not, this part I think is part of the discussion this morning.
Yeah.
It's also used as an assembly space, so it's a good space to get.
Could you get the whole school, could you get the whole school in the one that's
The
presented, the new?
We could look
I
at
don't
that, yeah.
I don't know.
Thank you, Deputy.
Full sets of features on the
Seats on the floor, right, yeah. I don't think, nothing.
And then what happens with that other space is they're able to do baseball, softball, and I think there's another spring sport that also comes in, but they cut the gym in half across. I don't know if they go indoors or
I
not.
don't think they go indoors.
Yeah,
But, yeah, it's true, and always in the spring, it's always dicey right at the beginning of baseball season, fields, everything's wet, still cold. So it's a good point, we looked at it both ways. Also, and I think that was discussed in an earlier meeting, you could adopt to build a larger gym, it's just that the funding,
we gotta talk, yeah.
Right,
so.
if that's the case, yeah.
So would there be a curtain on that one too, that we could bring down between both gyms?
Yes, yeah, so it's still.
So eventually we still
I
have
don't
2
know about
spaces for baseball and softball.
Yeah,
I think it's the other space that's going on that's utilized while they're doing their thing. I don't know if volleyball, is volleyball spring? No.
Boys or boys.
One's in the spring and one's in the
Boys.
fall. Yeah, so that's the other element. I knew there was.
yeah.
It's like, I don't think she lets that many teams in the gym at the same time. So,
Okay, so we can come back to.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
This is the auditorium. So just the orange space we're looking at, right? So the existing auditorium is, let's say it's 9,000 square feet. What would be fundable would be 8,000 square feet. The difference in seating is 600 to 500. These other rooms, by the way, band and chorus, that's part of the music program, that still would be included. And we would locate those, which is what we're now, is we locate those adjacent so they can be used during performances as green rooms and dressing rooms and so forth. Our opinion is not as big a difference here. We've talked to the theater and the music folks. For a typical performance, don't really need 600 seats. A lot of times for students, you'd rather have feeling of a packed house, so 500 seats is quite good. I think there's one event during the year, which is a music event that happens around the holidays, which is the only time you reach capacity, which could be done over 2 nights. You know, you could do jazz and absolutely, you can break it up in ways. This felt like, also including thinking about what it would take to renovate this auditorium. So it's not ADA accessible. We'd probably lose some seats with ramps, with trying to get, we're required to have accessible seating, not just in the back of the house, but mixed through. So there's a lot of things that would have to happen to make this a really quality auditorium. So felt like it was a better option to go for all new auditorium. Next slide. So we'll look at some options. As I said, every one of these, there's 4 of them, they have some site implications. So this is an option where we keep the existing gym. So it's a 2-story building for, this. So I'll preface this by saying we're not at architecture yet. We're just trying to get the building fit and get all the things that have to happen, right, in terms of circulation around the site. Again, here you can see in the dashed line what it would take to create a state sanctioned regulation track. It's a little bit wider actually. In this case, we'd be relocating softball and the multi-purpose room would get relocated once the existing school comes down and the tennis courts. All of those are happening right in this area, particularly when we keep the existing gym. Obviously, we don't want the gym to be, remote from the new building. So as the building kind of cozies up to that gym, that's right in the area where the softball and the multi-purpose is. So that's one scenario. We have parking, we're still utilizing some of the parking to the south of the site, trying to work and maintain as many fields as we possibly can. So just a real rough idea of how that works with the existing gym, auditorium, classroom, CTE. This, again, not exactly the way it would work. We want CTE to be spread out through the whole building, but just accounting for the program as we understand it today. The cafeteria, the media center, front door, all those kind of things. So that's one scenario, option A, that keeps the gym. Here's sort of a similar strategy if we didn't keep the gym. So if we don't keep the gym, we build a new gym. Still, it's a 2-story. We're still relocating the softball and the multi-purpose and tennis courts. A little bit more compact, a little bit less phasing. I think that's the other thing. When we're keeping the gym, you'd have to imagine that there's some time where you'd be without a gym for how, we can, Jay, you can jump in here, but how much can we do? I don't think we could renovate the gym just in the summer because it needs to be like new. So we need to sort of deal with that. But this one would be all new. It's on the site, nice. The next option, but this just gives an idea of, sort of the size and scale of those things. I think the other thing is it's a little bit easier, as I said, with keeping the existing gym, sort of, in terms of the adjacencies we want for educational reasons, it's a little bit trickier because that's tucked into where we in kind of the no-build zone. So obviously doing all new is it's sort of cleaner in terms of the approach and the timing, and in terms of being able to get everything adjacent the way we want to. Next option. So then we looked at, because the softball field is quite nice, and it's not just the field, it's not just the practice field, it has dugouts, it has backstop and everything. What would we do to keep that field and not have to relocate it? So in this option, we keep the softball field and relocate just the tennis courts and the practice field. What does happen is we get some portion of the building becomes 3 stories. Certainly we do a lot of schools that have 3 stories. There's a little bit of slope. We haven't gotten into all the details. There's a little bit of slope to the site, so maybe that building can get tucked down a little bit. But 3 stories is, there's the zoning issue, 35-foot height limit. So I don't know that we would be able to get down. Really, you need about 14 feet floor to floor when you're all done with the school. So we'd either be looking for a variance, which maybe isn't necessarily that big a deal, and we certainly would look to tuck that into the hill a little bit. But again, always keeping in mind all of these areas that we can't build around the creek. The other thing that's really nice about this option is the building has a direct connection to the creek. So in terms of some of these other things that we've heard about, in terms of outdoor learning spaces, connecting to what is a unique environmental landscape and the kind of improvements that we might make to the creek. It's nice that the school kind of doesn't have any of the roads and drop-offs between it and the creek area.
I'm sorry, is there a cost difference between B and C, the two-story?
So, I think at this level, we're not really looking at a cost difference. These are all, the only difference would be when we keep the gym, otherwise we're operating on the same square footage. I think that's really where we're at in terms of order of magnitude, square foot costs. I don't think there's inherently, a premium because it's 3 floors instead of 2 floors.
You talked earlier about the previous meeting about orientation of the sun.
Yeah,
So is there a difference between B and C?
No, all of these keep the classroom bars, what we're talking about is when the classroom bars are more or less or within 10 or 15 degrees of running east-west, so that all your windows are north and south, that's the best. It's actually, I mean, we talked about an interest rate, I think there's a 13-15% savings just in heating and cooling if we do something as simple as that. Much easier to control the sunlight that way. So your savings are in the systems that we have to put into the building. Better educationally, you don't have slanting afternoon sun.
So your B and C concept will have the classrooms with north, south.
All, everything we're showing has that, maintains that. And then, and I know I'm going through this fast, so I'm happy to go back. So if you go to that 3D one more, because you can start to see a little bit that's a little bit taller volume in order to fit it and keep all the fields that we're keeping.
We have found on our prior projects that get to that next level of design detail, when you go up 3 stories versus 2, your foundation's footprint slims up a little bit, your roof area slims up a little bit. So you have savings on those 2 items. It's not huge. When we price out the past, it's been like $20, $25 a square foot. So definitely within the margin of error in our concept cost estimates. I don't think it changed conceptually where we are, but as we get to the next level of detail, there might be some advantage there. It's not huge.
And just, I mean, some of the things we don't do is, we try not to build over a gym. Gyms or an auditorium, those are large fan spaces, a little bit of cost of trying to build on top of those. So, but there are strategies you could do. If we decided that, heating the softball was a real priority, we could continue to kind of fine tune it. We did look at one more option, which is similar to building, but this came up in an earlier meeting. What's a baseball? Right, what would baseball, to get baseball back on site? So this is regulation baseball field. A wrinkle with this is, this would include upgrading your competition field to turf. And the reason for that is we're losing a practice field. And the practice field becomes necessary because when you have a natural grass competition field, you can't use it all day long.
Yep.
You can't use it all week long. That means, you get a little bit of, there's a lot of advantages to doing turf. There's cost to it. But if you were to do, that would be our recommendation. If there was a priority to bring baseball back onto the site, would be in conjunction with upgrading to a turf field.
Is that reimbursable? Turf field, is that reimbursable?
Yes, as part of a full project.
It's also revenue, right? Because you can use it.
Okay.
You can also rent it out.
Is there any opportunity to possibly, in some off seasons, use the baseball field as a practice field?
Overlaying outfield.
Like in the outfield, is that possible?
We try not to do that only because then there's wear on the field. So then it's not, so like if you go to our current baseball field, because they use it for other things, like grass isn't great, like it just, if we're going to keep these on site and try to keep them as pristine as possible. We wouldn't want to use it as a practice. So, but when you have turf, you can
do
practice
whatever.
100 teams on it. It
Yeah.
doesn't have the same wear and tear as having a grass field. And we would still have, so that practice football, in essence, would be another quasi multi-purpose field. Anybody could practice there. We line it for football, but it could be the other practice field.
We're just,
Yeah.
we're sort of assuming that we're not diminishing the status quo,
Yeah.
right? If you have it, we don't wanna use
Yeah.
it, right?
Does that new, track, reaches and press box? Bathrooms?
I don't know if that's, you know, up to the district. I mean, we have space for bleachers. There is some grade drop off there, so kind of the bleachers kind of fit into that. Certainly, we've done that where, you know, you have some facilities, that can tuck under. But that's.
I would think we would look at that as a part of the overall cost. If we would at minimum have bleachers and a press box, but if we wanted to have bathrooms or something, like, we would have to look at that.
Concession
Yeah, we would
stands,
look
things
at
like
that as the total, or as part of our overall cost, if we were willing to invest whatever that is. But if it's part of the package, it's reimbursable.
So, if I may
Yeah.
just do a follow-up on that question, you know, the district prior to you even being involved, has probably looked at over 20 years, they've been trying to raise and have concession bathrooms
Yeah.
built. And there's actually funds available for that, where prior superintendents used it, weren't supposed to use it. So again, one of the things that we're dealt with when we're in the public is we need to have that put in and made a priority, because.
I mean, that's part of the
It's been-
design piece, and I
it's
agree
been a
with you. I think
discussion
those are
in the community
important
for over 20
pieces.
years. To answer Adam's question, if the baseball field is gonna be turf, there is ways to make it multi-purpose for other sports. I don't know if lacrosse is going on the football field, is that?
So that's what, so when I did build a turf field when I was in Portsmouth, and we striped our turf for soccer, football, lacrosse.
Yes.
Yeah, the football.
Boys and girls, because I found out also lacrosse is striped differently for boys and girls.
It is correct. It's a bigger field for.
All the stripes.
All the stripes are on
Is
it.
the
That's
football
right.
field in the plans for being converted to turf with the new track, is that?
That's what we're talking about. Yep, that would make it.
So you'd have the football field that's turf, the baseball field that's turf, football field would be multi-purpose.
Oh, I don't think, did you mean the baseball field would be turf?
Well, that's the I was just thinking if you could use it for that field, but
Yeah,
As grass.
That's
Would
a
we want turf
question,
baseball?
I think we would.
well, so the idea of baseball fields, the trend now in the New England area is at every level, college, D1 down to D3, JUCOs, and now high schools is going to turf because of the weather. Because of the weather. March,
Because it's raining.
they started March, they stopped playing April first, and the fields are just, the
We're
turf
not many
fields,
wetlands, so we-
they're able to go out there. Yeah, I just didn't know if the baseball field was gonna be turf or not.
Yeah, all of our schemes maintain the potential for doing the track and turf field, right, the expansion. We want to make sure that we're not showing anything that precludes you from doing that, but we didn't know until having this discussion whether that wanted to be, you know, kind of baked in.
So all we're looking at today is kind of the layouts.
Yeah.
Like, what do we agree on layout, A, B, C, or D? The details of it are still to be worked out and part of what we want to invest.
I mean, in the long run, turf is much more financially beneficial in the long run, because the maintenance factor is knocked down to a minimum, and it doesn't matter if it's football, soccer, lacrosse, baseball, whoever wants to play on it, they last a long.
Yeah, I mean, there's still maintenance with the
There is.
field, but yeah. The other thing is just the participation.
Yeah. Not that we're gonna put you out of a job.
Believe me, there's plenty of other things to do.
Let's see how close
Thank you.
But, so I would say, if, you know, the one thing.
Are we getting close to a vote? We just have folks who have to leave at 10, so
Yeah.
I don't know. So if these are the four big options, we
I
can
think we have
dig
a slide
into
that has all
details
four.
afterward. Okay, perfect.
I was like,
I'm sorry, you just,
So
yeah.
as I said, you can do the track upgrade on any of the schemes, so you're not really deciding that right now.
Right.
I think, it's, you know, keep the gym, or is a decision that would help? And then do we go with a more compact that would give you the option, right? Don't necessarily have to, but we would have to look at a more compact building in order to give us the option to explore baseball field or other fields.
Excuse me, I have a quick question. In D, it was the 3-story option. I am making an assumption that the 3 stories were in the classroom building and the CTE building. Is that right?
Yes.
Because the CTE building looked much smaller.
I thought the same thing.
No. That's something I think we need to dig into a little bit more, because we're still quite high level.
And the library, is that media or where would the?
Yeah, library's media center.
So that's the cafeteria. and the
Right,
library.
because we generally think of those kind of stacked, right, because they're not the same size, so you have the cafeteria on the ground floor, the library above, with kind of nice connection.
And that light gray is presumably moved passing space, internal passing space, interior passing.
Yeah, right.
Which could also have some collaborative.
Absolutely, yeah, we're really, we want every space to be a teaching space, right? But one of the things we heard that came out of the visioning is where's that heart of the school, where's that common space, which right now, I would argue is in the courtyards.
Yeah. So there's some good opportunity for creating that sort of community culture.
Absolutely, yeah. As I said, I don't think we have we're not trying anything that we don't think is, something viable and will be a great school. It's, some people live, 3 stories, live in them too.
So maybe just as a point of order, are we at this point voting on a design, or are we voting on the 3 options to replace, hybrid, renovate, or repair?
So I think the initial part is just, we said, replace, reno, or new. If it's new, then we also would like to know if there's an appetite for 3 stories, or if we want to just stick with 2 stories.
But is that something we have to make a decision today?
So the decision today will allow you to develop whatever that decision is more over the next 2 months. If we push the decision off, then come August, we're gonna have a much less developed solution. But if we can decide this today and everyone's comfortable, then we can really start to look at what the layout and shape of that building looks like right now. We're just planning big blocks, right?
So it's less about the surrounding of the school, because we understand that there's a lot more options, and if I'm hearing correctly, if you go to a higher building, assuming we get a variance, like we'll have more flexibility for the other space.
We've heard, you had some conversation, right, the variance. I think there are other buildings that have successfully obtained that variance, but we need to have that discussion.
Our objective, would be, once it's in direction today, then we can set up a meeting, with the, town planning department to start that process, so we can understand, the possibilities we have.
And if it comes to a point where it's gonna be a difficult challenge, we can come back and retreat to the other layout.
I think, from my point of view, you guys have really, haven't vetted this out, but if we got direction on, yes, keep the gym, or it's okay, don't keep the gym, we can dig in on new options, see if you can get it to 2 stories, we can start to, that would be great. And renovation, is that clearly off the table, or people want?
Are we prepared to make a motion instead of eliminating?
Yes.
Right, I'd like to make a motion to remove renovate due to the timeline, extended timeline, and the disruption of that, and also the additional cost, and the limitations of the existing building. So I'd like to make a motion to eliminate renovate.
Second.
Any discussion?
I think it makes sense.
Yeah.
All in favor?
You want to ask for a vote, then all in favor?
Yeah.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, unanimous. So then it's between the new and the ad reno.
I'll make a motion that we go with the new proposal based on the information that we received to date today. As a comparison to the ad reno, the timeline seems more appropriate, going with the new. And I will end my motion at that.
I'll definitely second that motion.
Any discussion?
Can I just ask, I mean, I'd like to hear from the school folks if the gym factor and the auditorium is, if you have an opinion.
So the auditorium is not a factor because we talked to our music and band folks, the new size is appropriate. Literally, we have one event and they're like, we could split it into 2 nights. We do it all in one. We do band and chorus. We could do a band night and a chorus night. And that's 1 night a year. It's the only time it's full. So we are really good with the auditorium. Programmatically, we don't need the bigger gym. The 2 gyms is what we need.
Yep.
So to have the new space in the shorter timeline is a preferred solution for us versus a larger gym that takes a longer time and is going to involve phasing, because programmatically, that disruption could impact like 4 years worth of kids.
Right.
It just doesn't seem like the value add is there to keep it, because essentially with the reno, we still just have 2 gyms.
Right.
Just, we're in a more compact space that's more energy efficient. Like right now, there's just, it's a big space, but do we utilize? It's not an efficient space, yeah.
It's not what?
An efficient space.
And the other thing too is it gets, with the new, gets it closer to the fields and doesn't have it be so isolated from where, when the PE is going outside or doing the things, they're closer to the fields. It makes more sense.
I would add additional comment, in the existing gym, we've already shored up a foundation on it, and it's always gonna be about 50 years behind the new building. I think starting all new, with a maintenance plan, it makes more sense than, I think it's gonna require additional work in the future. It's 50 years old now. So
Yeah.
Yep, agreed.
Agreed.
I have one more question. I didn't hear confirmation that we could fit the entire school population into the new size gym.
You can sit on the floor, it wouldn't fit.
Floor seating.
Yeah.
Yes, with floor seats.
So not in the bleachers, but by moving in extra seats.
Which I think you might have to do now anyways, right? Because I think there's bleachers around 700, is that about?
Yeah, I couldn't give you the number. I can tell you, we've had whole school assemblies, pep rallies, whatever in there, and we do have some folks on the floor or on the sides, but it's close.
This is one of the points, is the disruption factor. Around, you said you couldn't do it, it would take over a year to renovate the existing gym, right?
Well, I don't know, it would be over a year, but it would take more than a summer.
Right, and so then it's the figuring out how do you get those PE classes done during the school year.
Well, I just don't think there's a value add.
Right, I agree.
Severely impact programs.
Right.
We renovated a similar sized gym with Suffolk Construction 2 years ago. It was around a year and a half. The issue in that gym was built around the same time as the snow loads on the roofs. We had to swap out all the trusses, which meant
Right.
the whole roof off.
Thanks.
While you're up there, you might as well size it for your mechanicals. One thing leads to another, and before you know it, they have pretty much a brand new gym with old brick walls.
Oh, man. And an old foundation, right? Yeah. Just new.
So I'll amend my motion to include the comments made by the town administrator. It was duly seconded. If you want to reaffirm your second.
Second.
And then I believe we could move to a vote.
Sounds good, thank you. I think Walter has it captured in discussion, so good there. All in favor? All opposed? Great, unanimous passes. Are we comfortable providing direction, even if it's not a vote, just a general thought, feeling 2-story versus 3-story to give the.
So can you just refresh my memory again? Which ones are 2 stories and which one is 3?
So if we're not going here, we'd be looking at 2 stories versus a 3-story option. Really, the building here is not different, it's just the field configuration. So,
Do you have any elevation views?
not really, we have at this scale, it's hard to even see the difference. As I said, because of the way that the site's been manipulated with the fields and the leveling, it actually does drop down a little bit. So it would be nice if we could kind of tuck it in. I think that's the kind of thing we would be working on after this morning is, could we, personally, I don't think we it'd be great to get feedback about if people have concerns about 3 floors, but we can continue to look at reducing the amount of 3rd floor space we need.
I'm at the point where I'm not comfortable moving on that whole, I think we need to say elevation,
More so, yeah.
what it would look like from Chestnut Street, especially if you can ask for a variance.
I was gonna say, that's what I think our next step is to hear, like, do we need a variance? What would that look like? What is the
Yeah.
what are the elevation issues kind of
Right.
thing? I think that's kind of what we need more information on to see if, maybe, to find out if it's even feasible to do the.
Right, and as I said, we're meeting this afternoon with the
Okay.
wetlands consultant to confirm, disturbed and undisturbed area and the quality of the creek and everything like that, so we'll be able to find.
Sure, can I make a motion, just meeting the architects, design, give us some visuals on what the two-story and three-story from different perspectives will look like, and then we have another meeting, even if it's on a virtual meeting. I know the timelines, but.
Yeah.
Can I just ask another question? If we go back to the two-story, it looks like the baseball field is removed because we don't have the space.
Right.
But is it possible to create a multi-purpose field area that incorporates softball and baseball in the same location? Where I think you have the tennis courts, and I don't know if that's basketball to the right.
No, this is the Blues tennis.
The Blues tennis court, what's to the right? That's
We're maintaining some.
Well, that's the multi-purpose field.
Multi-purpose.
This is a multi-purpose field, those are the tennis courts.
So there's a multi-purpose field where the intention is for lacrosse and baseball, lacrosse and soccer?
Anything.
It wouldn't matter, but I think C and D, the buildings are the same, it's just, we have turf so that we can have the baseball field. So I think like between C and D, it's D every day, but our question is between B and D, because that's the two-story versus the three-story, I think
Sure.
that's
So I'm just,
yeah.
I'm trying to wrap this around in my
Yeah.
head. Because it looks like, so the softball field in B is being relocated, right? That's not the original location. of the
Right,
softball.
right.
So the softball field is getting relocated. My question is, can that become, so baseball can be brought back on campus?
You'd have to.
But then we lose
You'd have to
softball.
lose something.
Yeah,
Well, softball and baseball can be on the same multi-purpose baseball field.
but they play at the same, they play on
They
the same
play
days.
softball's
Yeah.
level and, baseball is round.
So- I hear you, but this is my area of extreme expertise. So what happens is softball is in one corner and baseball is in the other corner.
Where the outfields overlap.
The outfields would overlap, but there would be a temporary fence that would separate the mound area from baseball and the softball field, because the softball plays on a much smaller area. Look, don't make my issues your issues, but this is a huge base of mine that I answer to a lot. And they're going to want me to answer them the question and look at the votes to vote. But from the beginning, the discussion was always to bring everything back on campus.
Yep.
That's why I think our next step is the two-story or the three-story.
Yeah.
If a three-story is possible, then that's our
It's D.
conversation,
Yeah.
like, can we do D, is that affordable, what's the cost? So I think that's why we almost need like an in-between before we get to that conversation is, okay, can we do a two? And Ed, I saw you had your hand up, so I don't know.
Well, I'm with Steve on this, I'm with Steve, I think we do need to get some elevations.
Yep.
Because we're going to have the surrounding neighborhood that live there that will have some input, I'm sure. So I guess moving forward, scheduling wise, is where are we going to land next meeting? And what can we anticipate to have you guys bring back to us?
Yeah.
As far as, is it reasonable that you can bring back drawings and putting our things all together?
That's a design team question.
Yeah.
That's 2 weeks from now?
Yep. What day?
I would say we have to do that.
Sure.
Because the overall schedule requires us to get to a place where we can put real numbers on it. By August, I think. So we need to do what you're asking.
What day are you looking at?
What is it?
Next meeting. I don't want to get ahead, I'm just, July's a busy month.
2 weeks is the 13th.
You probably can't.
Oh, you're not meeting that week, I'm not here.
How you doing with it?
Oh, no, we can meet the 13th, I'm sorry, I'm away the week after that. So if the 13th is doable, we can meet the 13th, or else it's gonna have to be the 27th, or the week of the 24th.
Is virtual?
Virtual is a possibility.
Yep.
Except you can't vote virtually.
Yeah, we can't have a public body, the members can't meet virtually.
You can meet virtually, but you can't take a vote virtually.
Yeah.
I don't think that the body can't meet virtually if we're a public
No,
body.
we
Yeah,
have to
you
be,
can, I mean, you can listen in, but.
Yeah.
what do you think of the 24th?
Or, yeah, I mean, you tell me, is the 13th doable, or do we need to move to the week
So
of
the
the
24th, I'm
24th?
out of town,
Oh,
not that it
okay.
matters, but, I mean. So I would definitely be virtual on the 24th. It is, yeah, I'm still in this, really World Series.
I have one other request.
Yeah.
Is it possible that we could get this even if it was like the night before the meeting? Because it's overwhelming to have 80 slides. Honestly, I can't read a lot of this, like the numbers, and it would just be really helpful, even if it was like 12 hours before the meeting, to get it so that we can actually see it.
We'll try. No, we understand and we know. I'll be completely honest. I was working on this till 5 minutes before I got my truck and drove here this morning. We're on a crazy fast schedule to try to get things out 2 days in advance. We'll try. It's always our goal.
It can be a draft,
It's gonna be
and
tough.
it may vary from, there may be stuff added to it.
So we're talking about the 13th or is that?
So, our question is, can you get the elevations from the 13th?
So elevations, 2-story versus 3-story, just to get an idea of scale.
And obviously what they're having the discussion with.
So massive.
Mass.
Yes, we can do.
So 13th?
I'm not saying a great detail, but just.
No, yeah, we'll have not every single elevation, but important. What you see from the street, what you see
From the street, from 9 Street.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, so, one mayor, and I know you have a motion. We can document that in minutes or we can take a formal vote. It's up to you.
It's just a request.
Yeah, I made a motion.
I made a motion that get some elevation views and we come back to vote on.
2-story versus 3-story.
2-story or 3-story.
I'll second that.
Okay.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
All right.
You're getting good at it.
There you go.
So our actions before we meet next time, we need to reach out to planning and zoning, figure out the height restriction, how much of a restriction that really is, what the likelihood of variance moving forward, and then get some estimate studies done, and we'll review those in a couple weeks.
And then the other thing we could do, speaking of the neighbors, is maybe have a community meeting and specifically invite those neighbors to talk about what we're doing and what's happening, to just kind of make sure they're aware, because I think if you don't start making the neighborhood aware, people get like sketchy, like, so.
Well, they get their own ideas.
Or they get their own ideas. So once we vote on that second or third, then I think we should have a community meeting and just share. I mean, it is going to, right, it is going to be a much nicer view than what they have now. It's just going to be something maybe a little taller in their view. So, but I think having them get the details should help.
I know it's kind of early, but what's the building constructed of? What's the exterior, what's the exterior?
We're not there yet, so we'll be there second half of August before it goes to the estimators, and we'll actually price out a few different options. And honestly, we still want to be locked at that point. We're gonna continue to tune that at each stage of design development. And that'll be similar, like grass versus turf fields. Those conversations are kind of cost discussions. So we'll get everything estimated. The estimators will put a detailed report together, and then we'll have kind of an a la carte menu that we'll go through with this group. And as a group, we'll figure out what's in, what's out, and we'll update the bottom line accordingly.
I just think it might be important if you're gonna do the elevation, show it, but you can give us a couple options.
Yes, they'll have a materials, color, things like that, right?
But we'll note on it that they're not final decisions.
Yeah.
All right, just a couple more slides, and then we can give everyone the rest of your morning back.
I saw the picture, I did see that.
Yep, so community outreach efforts, we had a presence at the Bristol Concert Series 5 nights.
Yeah.
To be honest, the interest right now is somewhat limited, just because.
Anybody wants to see a picture of the new high school? Like, we don't have a picture of the new high school.
It's not there yet.
We're not there yet. So I think that's why I think when we have something that's a little more exciting for folks to look at, we'll have a little more interest. But like anyone who came over was like, so what's the new high school gonna look like? And I'm like, we don't.
We had
That's
a,
not decided yet.
Well, plus more anyone who came over with people that.
We already knew. Also true.
we did have a couple interactions, and you guys made the motion that was in complete agreement that a renovation was an absolutely terrible idea.
Oh,
and
yeah.
Don't put the kids through that, so we had 2 or 3.
Yeah.
That came over and made that.
So good effort, but we need to take another swing at it once we have some more information that people are.
Yeah, the Warren concert series might be a little better because there's like a gate people have to walk through. If we could be near the gate, we might like force people to pay attention to us.
There you
This
go.
was so open that like we weren't necessarily, and even when we were by the souvenir shop, which got lots of traction, nobody came over to like where we were. So I'm hoping we're gonna give it a shot at the Warren events and see if, because of the way it's kind of set up, we can get more attention. And I think we're also gonna try to go over to Hope and Main instead of. Yeah.
Which is kind of fun, because it's on an old, in one of our old school buildings.
So we're gonna try a few more places, see if we can get more interaction from folks, more attention. We need giveaways too. I'm gonna put something together. The golf balls attracted people to us.
Oh, nice. Purple golf balls?
No, we're not giving away golf balls. The golf people are giving away golf balls. We gotta give away something else, pencils or something, I don't know.
So the other update on community outreach, if you pop over to the district's website, you'll see that capital projects tab up top. That brings you to a list of all the documents. Presentation agenda minutes from this meeting will be up there as soon as minutes are approved. The presentation will be up there right away. And any other documentation from the project. And then there's also a set of FAQs. We talked about that last time we met. So on outreach front, just watch out for those future events. We're looking to have the forum and the butter meetings at the high school coming up after we have better renderings and a little more information. And then social media, like we talked about last time, will be tabled until we get closer to the referendum date.
Yeah.
So that's a quick update on that. Key dates and next steps, no changes here. So I won't approach you with that again, but September 15th is the date. And then overall timeline, still the same, no changes since last time that we met. And that's all we have for you today. Thank you.
Thank
for your time. That was a lot.
Okay. Okay. Sounds like a plan.
You don't